Uno de los primeros dibujos animados de los que tengo recuerdo es el Laboratorio de Dexter. Lo veía cuando era chiquito y lo vi quizás un par de años crecido. Hacía mucho tiempo que tenía ganas de hablar con alguien que haya estado involucrado. Pude conversar con Rob Renzetti, que no solo fue uno de los animadores involucrados en esta producción, dirigió varios capítulos, sino que además convivió con Genndy Tartakovsky, quien fue el creador de esta serie, y me pudo revelar algunos secretos detrás de cómo fue que se gestaron tantos chistes, incluido el de Omelette du Fromage. Un dato de color no menor es que el querido Rob le puso la voz a Dexter en el primer piloto que hicieron antes de que Cartoon Network lo convirtiera en serie. Todo esto lo van a ver en este informe sobre el Laboratorio de Dexter.
We now return to Mira Akien and Contre with our latest interview.
I mean, it was very special because it was created by my best friend, Genndy Tartakovsky. We had been roommates together at Cal Arts and had been very, very, very close for the past maybe 3 or 4 years before Dexter got picked up. And it was not just only the two of us, but Craig McCracken, Paul Rudish, Jason Rote was the writer. He was kind of the fifth person in the kind of core group of people, but all of us had worked on Two Stupid Dogs together, and all of us had gone to Cal Arts together. So it was really my crew of people. And when Dexter got picked up, it was of course a success for Genndy, but it was really a success for all of us because it was kind of the first time that our way of making cartoons and our not philosophy, but our style and our sense of humor was validated and given life.
Laboratorio de Dexter.
I want to ask you a few of the particular episodes, starting with, I think, one of the most remembered episodes, the one with Omelette du Fromage. I don't know if...
Omelette de fromage, omelette de fromage, omelette de fromage, omelette de fromage.
Do you remember the story behind? Because it's so little. The story is really little, but it's so effective.
Yeah. I don't, that's a fan favorite. It wasn't that remarkable at the time when we were making it. I think we all thought it was funny and a throwaway. And it was an experiment in seeing how little story you could get away with in a cartoon. And the answer is very little. When you're doing 7-minute cartoons, you don't need much in terms of story if you can come up with fun gags.
Código de identificación.
Omelette du Fromage.
Acceso negado.
I think we all came from the perspective when we first started out. I know I'm guilty of this, especially, which is putting too much story into a cartoon so that there's too much, all the story beats you have to go through and you don't have time for gags or fun or any room for the cartoon to breathe. And Genndy really had an instinct for reducing things down so that the cartoons would have room to breathe and there'd be time for fun, and time to explore the concept rather than loading it up with so many story points that, you just had to rush through them all and the cartoon was over. So that was one of the ones that kind of showed us that we didn't really need to do too much story. If you could come up with 2 or 3 good gags to support a silly idea, you were pretty much done after 7 minutes. It doesn't take that long to run through 7 minutes. The basic idea was that everybody thinks French is so sexy and romantic that you can say basically anything in French and it sounds good. French just sounds so otherworldly and romantic. So it doesn't take much to get, especially English speaking women, to excited about the French language. So that was the basic idea.
Yeah.
And Omelette du Fromage, I don't know why we came up with that particular phrase.
Omelette du Fromage.
Oh, Dexter. El francés es el lenguaje del amor.
There's another huge moment, the one that became a meme. I have failed you. It's Dexter speaking to an Einstein poster.
Lo siento, mi mentor, te he fallado.
I can't remember whether he came up with Dee Dee or Dexter first, but the idea was that the other one was a contrast for the first, right? So if you have this little boy who's very much concerned with hard science and facts and all that, what would play off of him, like a kind of silly sister who just enjoys art and dancing and all the the more esoteric things of life. So that was basically all we had with the two of them when we started. So as you go through the cartoons, every cartoon is a chance to learn something new about these characters. So that's very much harkening back to his basic science core, but the idea that he worships the scientists that came before him is a little bit more of an extrapolation. Like science is his religion, right? Like he doesn't worship, Jesus or Muhammad. He worships Einstein and the other giants of the science world. So I mean, we extrapolated that later when we had a Stephen Hawking substitute show up and in the actual series and stuff.
Mother Nature and Father Time both ruled the world together. But if you take just a little time, prove them wrong and throw them out the window.
That was just kind of us playing around and deciding how would Dexter relate to, someone bigger than himself, because he's very much caught up in his own ego in the show, right? He's very much involved in how all his own grandiose plans. But when something goes wrong, you get the sense that like he feels like the giants of science are watching him and he has to live up to their standards.
Hello, it's me, Chubby.
Hi, Chubby.
One thing that's popped up on Twitter for me a lot, what people have asked me about, is there's an episode where they go to a Chuck E. Cheese type restaurant, and there's a scene at the end when the animatronics stop performing and the audience gets excited and they start clapping, and most of the audience just flies out of the screen. And that came from a misinterpretation of something that I wrote in the animation direction for overseas, which was, the audience rises up. And because of the way it was translated, that just meant they stood up and cheered, but the overseas studio thought they meant they rose up off screen. And it was a mistake, and we would normally correct it, but when we all watched the show coming back from overseas together, and we just all were laughing uproariously, and we thought like, well, this is so funny to us that the audience will probably think it's funny as well, and it doesn't need to make logical sense. But the logical reason we came up for it was that they had enjoyed the show so much that they had transcended their bodies, and they'd risen to heaven because they were in love with it so much. So.
And what about the inventions? I don't know how much did you study like technology or science in order to...
No, I mean, the inventions were pretty much just made up for whatever we need. I mean, the thing wasn't a meme. We wouldn't have called it a meme back then, but the inside joke that we came up with was just always Dexter tightening something with a wrench, which was just like a nonsense action to keep him alive. Like while Dee Dee is like doing some weird stuff behind the background, he's trying to not pay attention to it. So he just keeps tightening. Like that was just an early episode, and we just kind of all fell in love with it as like shorthand. Like, and we had so many episodes to produce, like rather than trying to come up with something new for him to be just doing some kind of nonsense action, he just was always tightening a wrench. And later on in the show, we'd show him with a giant wrench, and like we did variations on the wrench gag, but it was just an easy throwaway. So yeah, no, we didn't. If anybody researched science, it was probably me, but I'm not a science. None of us were science people. It was my worst subject in school, but we really didn't look into scientific concepts too hard. We usually just came up with a gag idea or a joke area, and then invented some sort of machine that somehow had something to do with it, as illogical as that machine might be.
Unen sus dedos bajo el mismo techo para encarar el reto a la luz del día en Los Amigos Justicieros.
When we first got picked up for Dexter, they wanted a middle cartoon, so I actually wasn't involved again, and like I had to go home because I had a wife to go home to. But Paul and Genndy and Craig stayed up one night, and I forget who invented it, but I think it was mostly Paul's baby was Dial M for Monkey. That was the first middle cartoon for Dexter.
Al parecer nunca llegarás a ser nada más que un simple mono.
Monkey, soy agente de mentira. Ayúdanos.
Paul was such a huge fan. Dial M for Monkey was the middle cartoon, and the Justice Friends just kind of came along as throwaway characters in one episode of Dial M for Monkey, where they wrestle wrestler. Like, so we needed a bunch of superheroes to go up against the superhero, and that's when Paul kind of created the Justice Friends. So then when they didn't want any more Dial M for Monkey, they wanted us to do a different middle cartoon. Genndy proposed the Justice Friends like thing as them being roommates and whatever, and that's one that happened. But Paul pretty much took the lead on the Dial M for Monkeys. I think he didn't storyboard every single one of them, but he mostly storyboarded them all and did all the designs for them and stuff. So that was kind of his baby. But yeah, I mean, superhero stuff was easier. Dexter and Dee Dee, like those cartoons could be anything because the idea was so wide open. So sometimes it was a challenge to come up with like a hook for a Dexter cartoon. But Dial M for Monkey and the Justice Friends, like they both had concepts, especially Dial M for Monkey. It's just a superhero show, right? It's going to be, so the superhero is going to have some sort of fight or challenge. There's probably going to be a supervillain. It's got to be wrapped up. So those are very more formulaic and easy kind of to come up with. So it was good because we generated ideas for those. I think like we only had to do 6 of them. Like we had the ideas super, super, super quick. And it was just easy because we were, stressing about all the Dexter stuff we had to come up with. Having that as a middle cartoon alleviated some of the pressure to be coming up with more Dexter cartoons.
Amigos de la Justicia, reúnanse!
Do you think, or did you discuss the possibility of doing a Dexter live action show? Or do you see like we can see something like that in the future?
I mean, who knows what we'll see in the future? It's always possible. I don't know if there was ever any discussion of it back in the day. I don't think so. I mean, it's so grounded in cartoons, in cartoon language. I have a hard time seeing that as a live action show. It's so, the characters are so silly and cartoony, and I know we see a lot of cartoony live action these days, but I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of us would necessarily want to be involved in that kind of thing. I know that Craig took a very hands-off approach to the Powerpuff live action stuff that's going on. They did want his thoughts on stuff, and he did offer up his thoughts, but that usually those kind of reboots are kind of almost best left to someone who wasn't involved in the original project, because they come with a different perspective and a different and different thoughts and different ideas, and sometimes that's good, to reinvigorate the idea and to take it in a different direction. So I'll never, in today's world when everything's being remade and rebooted and all that, I mean, I would never say nothing, a Dexter cartoon couldn't become a Dexter live action show, but it seems like a long shot.